Welcome back, Irish fans, to Breaking Down Braves Boys podcast. I guess I should add maybe some Wake Forest fans too, so everybody's welcome here. But tomorrow night, Notre Dame's going against Wake Forest. I know Wake Forest just came off of a beautiful game against Miami, as all Miami games are, just like the one we played. Notre Dame's coming off of a huge win against Pitt, maybe their best performance like in the modern era is insane. But today I got Connor O'Neill. He's covering Wake Forest. So if you want to introduce yourself, or we could just get going.
Sure. I'm Connor O'Neill. I cover Wake Forest football and basketball for a Substack that's of my own publication, I guess, after 3 years with the Winston-Salem Journal. So my fourth season covering the basketball team and enjoying it.
For sure. I'm glad you're enjoying it with that team. I'm sure it's pretty brutal to watch at times, but I think we're kind of in the same boat. So I guess to start out, can you kind of give me a little bit of a briefing on Wake's starting five and kind of what each of the starters can do?
Yeah, so it starts with their point guard, Davian Williamson. He's a transfer from East Tennessee State, which is where Coach Steve Forbes came from. It's his first season. Davian he's listed as 170 pounds on the roster. I have my own questions about that listing. He's very slight. And looking at him, you might not think that he's a lead guard of an ACC team, but he handles it well. And the biggest thing about him is he's very, very competitive. And that's really, it's shown. Wake's season was kind of disjointed, and they had 2 games on Thanksgiving week and then didn't play for 33 days. And Davian really didn't emerge as their best player in those first 2 games or in the first, 2 or 3 games once they got back and got their season underway. It's only been in about the last 6 or 7 games that it's really become obvious that, he's the guy that makes it go. If he's not playing well, then they're less likely to win, and their offense is less likely to be fluid or as fluid as it can be with the kind of piecemeal roster that they had to put together for this season. So he's really a big one to watch for, number 4. Their starting lineup hasn't changed in the last 3 games. It had changed a lot before this little stretch that they're in, but typically at number 2, they'll start Jonah Antonio. He's a grad transfer who this is his 4th college in 4 years, I think, or 5 years. He's a shooter. First and foremost, I think about 95% of the shots he's taken this season have been threes, and he's very streaky. Sometimes he'll come out and it'll be great, and he'll go 4 for 6 on threes, and it'll really be an asset. Sometimes he'll come out and miss a couple threes and get taken out, and they'll play 10 minutes of game time, and you'll kind of wonder where he is. He kind of buries himself on the bench if he doesn't start the game hot, and so he's a little streaky and up and down. They've been starting at the 3 Isaiah Museus, who I believe now might be the only player who's started every game for them this season. He is the only player on the roster with more than 1 year of ACC basketball experience. I mean, that's what happens when there was a little bit of exodus when Danny Manning was the coach, and then after Danny Manning left, they had a few more players like Olivier Sarr leave the program. So that left Isaiah as the most experienced player on the roster, and he's a junior who's played the last 2 seasons on these pretty bad Wake teams. And you can see it with Isaiah's game that sometimes he's been pressing. It was really obvious early in the season. He's kind of calmed down since then. He still has a couple moments where it makes you think he's trying to score a 6-point bucket every time down the court, but those are few and far between now, especially compared to the first couple games of the year. He's really been he's a valuable leader for the team. He's a valuable voice. He's 6'8". He provides really good length, especially when they play him at the 3. And he's another one, kind of like Antonio. If he hits a shot or two, he can get going in an instant and just pour in some points on you before you know it. They've been starting Ishmael Massoud at the 4. He's one of 3 returning sophomores on the team, one of 2 in the starting lineup. We'll get to the other one in a second. But Ish is another 6'8" guy. I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but once he gets going, I mean, he can really catch on fire. I mean, he was 8 for 10 on threes against Pitt, and that was about a week and a half ago. And somebody asked me in a radio appearance last week if that was sustainable, and it was just kind of like, well, I don't know if 8 for 10 is ever going to be sustainable for anybody, even in a gym by themselves shooting against air. But he is that kind of shooter. He does have that capability to pour him in on you, and kind of, once he gets going, like I said, he's 6'8". He's got a high release. It's a quick release and it's confident. I mean, you're not blocking that type of shot. So he's a really fun shooter to watch when he gets going. And then starting at the 5, they've had Odi Iguama. He's the other returning sophomore in the starting lineup. The best thing about Odi is how active he is and how just he's physical inside. He doesn't get pushed around. He will keep balls alive. He'll tip balls out. He'll be a pest inside. He's getting to where he's got a refined post move or two. He needs a little bit of time to really get to where he's comfortable on the court, and sometimes the more experienced post defenders in the league don't give him that time. Like Manny Bates was a bit of a struggle for him. So, their starting 5 is about as good as you could hope for a team that's 2-7 in the ACC. I mean, they've got guys that when it's their night, they give them a chance to win games, and that's really, what else can you ask for with a coach who's in his first year, who took over a program in the middle of a pandemic, who, they missed almost the entire month of December with COVID issues. So it's really just, you don't want to say it's a free year and the results don't matter, but the results don't mean as much as some of the other stuff that's happening with the program in terms of getting a foundation in place.
For sure. I definitely agree. I mean, I don't think anybody really expected them to even, a lot of people from the outside didn't even expect them to be this good. So definitely a nice step, but kind of piggybacking off of what you said, I know they used the transfer portal a lot this offseason, but they also lost pretty much everybody. Lost Notre Dame killer Olivier Sarr. Do you think this is better than the team we saw, I think, what was it, last February, when they pretty much ended Notre Dame's tournament hopes? Yeah,
I'm glad you brought that up, because I asked Mike Bray about that after the game in Winston last year, and he was making a pretty good joke about how, yeah, that guy kills us every year.
Did it again in December.
Yeah, 2 years ago, that was kind of his coming out party toward the end of his sophomore season, and then last year, yeah, I think it was something crazy like 21-14 or something like that. But yeah, to your original point, talent-wise, this team is probably not as good as last year's team, but from a cohesion standpoint and from a system standpoint and from a sense of playing to your strengths and how those strengths match up against other Power 6 conference teams, this team is so much better. It's you're watching modern basketball. You're watching, I think, something like 43 or 44% of their field goal attempts are three-pointers. It's just I try not to disparage the previous staff too much, but this is one area where the style of basketball is just so much better suited for where basketball is right now with a 5-out offense. It's really actually 4 out and 1 in. The way that they have to play with Odi Iguama and Emmanuel Okpomo is a really raw freshman center that they have. Those guys you're not asking those guys to step out and hit 18-footers. So it's not quite the 5-out offense that Steve Forbes ran at ETSU and won 30 games with last year, and it's not quite where he wants it to be, but you can see it moving in that direction, and that's where it's just so much more encouraging to watch than it would be the last couple years.
For sure. I can now see why Olivier Sarr would not want into that. Definitely doesn't fit him at all. But you kind of touched on it with the 5-out, but is there anything they do schematically that's kind of different from a normal team?
I mean, it's not much. It's all about ball movement, ball screens, ball movement, off-ball screens. Coach Forbes mentioned at the end of the Miami game that they kind of changed up their offense a little bit to run a few more screens and cuts and put a little more pressure on the rim. Now, I think part of that has to do with who Miami has and more specifically who they don't have. I mean, Miami's marching out a roster that, I mean, in the pregame shoot-around, they have more guys rebounding than they have shooting because they have so many unavailable guys. Like Sam Wardenberg's out there in a boot, and, you know, there's just – they kicked off the freshmen between the Notre Dame and Wake games. So – it'll be interesting to see if there's as much of what was a new focus for that game that translates to the one against Notre Dame, and that's, you know, that's kind of a mystery until we get to tip off.
For sure. You also kind of talked about playing to their strengths, and that kind of ties in with the scheme. But what do you think their biggest strength is, and what's their biggest weakness as a team?
They're good shooters, and they've got so many guys that can hit you from long range. The 4 guys that I talked about in the starting lineup, other than Odi Iguama, I mean, all of those guys can light up from 3. You know, Isaiah Museus going into the game at Carolina was 4 for 24 this season, and it was kind of ironic because he gave us a quote in the preseason of like, this coaching staff will really tell you that if you can't make a shot, stop shooting the shot. And, you know, we're going to use analytics, and you're going to tell us like, oh yeah, you can make that shot. Well, we're going to show you the numbers and show you that you can't make that shot. So Isaiah Museus tells us that in the preseason, and then he comes out and he's 4 for 24 on threes. And it's just like, well, have they told this guy to stop shooting like he said they would? And then he goes out against North Carolina and he makes 7 threes in a game. So he's made 7 in a game. Masood has made 8, like I said, against Pitt. Jonah Antonio, I think his season high is 5 or 6, but he's been maybe you could say the most consistent, at least out of that trio, in terms of being able to hit, you know, 2 to 4 a game. Jaylen Johnson is another guy I didn't mention. He's a lefty who transferred from Tennessee, who really didn't get much use under Rick Barnes and was going to transfer to East Tennessee State. He had signed as a transfer to ETSU, and then instead of going there, he moved with Steve Forbes to come to Wake. And he's had a couple games where he's made 2, 3, 4 3-pointers and really given them a boost off the bench. The most recent development is Carter Witt. I guess we have to call him a freshman. He's going to be a freshman next year. He was in high school a month and a half ago. He was 0 for against ACC teams on threes. He finally made his first one against Miami, and then made 2 more, and was 3 for 3 in that game. So if he can provide another boost in that category, I mean, that's just going to be more firepower for them behind the arc. The biggest weakness I would say at this point is, you know, I don't think it's anything defensively. I don't know if you can pinpoint anything offensively. It might just be a lack of overall talent. They're not overly reliant on one player to have a good game, to have a big scoring night in these games that they win. It's more of a factor of who's going to step up, who of, you know, anywhere from 5 to 8 guys feels like they could step up and be the lead scorer on any given night. but where the weakness comes, I think, is as good as Davian Williamson has been, they don't have that guy that you can count on to give you, 15, 17, 20 points if you really need it. We've seen it in flashes from Davian, and this is probably a little unfair because, like I said, they missed the entire month of December. When you miss December, you miss, they missed, I think, about 4 non-conference games that would have been great for their confidence levels. As Forbes has told us, it would have been great for them to be able to implement stuff in practices and implement stuff in the game plan and then see it work, as opposed to having to do that against ACC teams. And, they're 2-7 in the league. It hasn't, what they've implemented hasn't always worked on the court. So I would say just again, it's probably unfair, but at this point it kind of is what it is. And I would just say that the biggest weakness is the lack of true proven talent.
For sure. Makes sense coming from a first-year coach and a team that had that many transfers. Got a couple more for you. Where do you think they'll finish in the league? I know they had a 6-game losing streak, but they're starting to finally put it together against some teams that aren't insane.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm not gonna get on here and say that they're gonna finish even in the top half. I could see them finishing, around the 10 or 11 mark. That might be the ceiling. That, they had a pretty. It's shaking out that they had a pretty front-loaded schedule with the ACC and the way the standings look now. I mean, I did the research when they went into the Pitt game, and they had played 6 ACC games before that Pitt game. That was going to be their 7th ACC game, and all of them were against different opponents. And they would have played at that point 7 of the 8 ACC teams that were above 500 at that point. So you're talking about. I know Duke isn't what Duke usually is, and I know Carolina isn't what Carolina usually is, but they're still above 500 in the ACC. They had Louisville in there. They had Virginia in there. They had Georgia Tech in there. They had Virginia Tech in there. They played a lot of the better teams in the ACC, and now they're kind of getting the reprieve. They beat Pitt. Pitt's sliding now. They beat Miami, and now they're playing Notre Dame. They get a weekend off, allegedly, this weekend, if nothing else gets reshuffled. And then they play at Boston College, which is another one that's not, they're not scaring you the way that some other ACC teams would. So you're really seeing it's a little bit of regression to the mean. And I think that, they've proven they can hang with the big boys. They've proven that they can beat one of the teams kind of in their tier of the ACC. So I think it's realistic to think of, maybe sneak into 10th or 11th place and, who knows, maybe even avoid the Tuesday in Greensboro game if they sneak into 9th.
Yeah, Mike Bray always loves trying to sneak out of that hole, so hopefully for their sake they can do it. But before I let you go, I know predictions can get you in trouble sometimes, but you got anything for this one? Preferably a Notre Dame wins prediction.
I'm not going to go out and say Notre Dame is going to win. I don't really want to say Wake is going to win either. I think these are 2 pretty evenly matched teams. I would give it a little bit of a cop out and say this. I think that the team that makes more threes is going to win. I know that's kind of like saying the team that scores more points is probably going to win, but looking at the numbers, they've both been hot from 3-pointers recently. I think Notre Dame has won 3 of the last 4, and in all 3 of those wins, they've hit double-digit threes. Wake is in a stretch right now where 3 of the last 4 games they've made 15, 13, and 13 threes. And the one game they didn't hit double digits, they had 8 against NC State. So it's going to be fun. That's going to be kind of a 3-pointer barrage. And as a guy who, a lifetime ago enjoyed shooting 3-pointers, that's the kind of basketball that I like to watch.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Makes sense. That's all I have for you. Thank you for coming on. And I'm not sure if these teams play again. Hopefully, we don't see them playing on Tuesday night in Greensboro, and we don't have to have you back on then. But if they do play again at some point, I'll try to get you back on. So thank you for coming on.
Sounds good. Thanks,
All
Jay.
right, so now we got a really good breakdown of Wake Forest. Gonna make this quick because that was really good, long kind of thing. So to start, I'm gonna go with the keys. These are gonna be some of the most simple keys all year. Wake Forest. I think Notre Dame is more talented than Wake Forest, like by a lot. So one, outshoot them. Wake Forest seems to live and die by the three ball. If Notre Dame can stay with the momentum they had against Pitt, get really hot, then Wake's gonna have a really tough time beating them. Two, force them to beat you off the dribble. Like I said, Wake Forest kind of lives and dies by the three ball like Notre Dame did last year. So if you can really get up into them, if Hub and Ryan and even Wirtz can kind of get up into them, make them beat you off the dribble, don't give them easy looks from three, you'll be in a really good spot. And then three, keep up the offense you had versus Pitt. I mean, that was maybe the best offensive performance I've seen from Notre Dame in like the Prentice Hub era. I can't think of any other games really off the top of my head, but really, really awesome performance. It seemed like they didn't miss a shot in the entire first half. Really frustrating Pitt, 84 points, but it seemed like a lot more than that. Especially in the first half, it seemed like they were going to get to 100. So if they can keep that up, I don't think there's a lot of teams in the ACC that can beat them. So that's my key. It's pretty simple, but you don't have to do too much when you're so talented like Notre Dame is playing against a team like Wake, who has a lot of guys who weren't going to play Power 5 this year. They were going to play for like Eastern Tennessee. So that's what I have for that. Things to watch for, how Hub plays. He's had a really awesome streak, and I think he can keep it up against Wake. I don't think there's anybody who can really slow him down on Wake, especially with what he did to Wabisa Vide against Virginia Tech. Had a great game there. Has done a really good job getting big men switched onto him and getting into the basket on him. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how Hub plays. And then two, does Notre Dame come out flat in this game? Because that was one of their best performances. Last year they came out flat against a team like Wake and lost that game. So if they come out flat, then they're in trouble. Hopefully we don't see that like we saw last year, but that's something to be cautious of. I think if Notre Dame plays their game, they'll win this game. So hopefully they can keep that up. Three, I think I don't really have a third thing to watch for. I mean, this game is pretty straight up. Wake isn't that great of a team. My matchup to watch, it's going to be Prentice Hub versus Davian Williamson. Probably the two best players as of late playing. Davian Williams is averaging 13.8 a game. Hub has had a really good stretch. So I think those are the two guys that the offenses are going to flow through, and whichever one plays better is going to give their team a better shot. So that's what I have for that. My leading scorer, I'm going to go with Nate. I don't think Virginia Tech has, or not Wake. I don't think Wake has any answer at all for him. I think he could eat tomorrow. It just is a matter of does he get enough shots up to have a big game. Also hoping Cormac Ryan is in that conversation, but I think it'll be Nate or Hub. Cormac has been playing really well lately, though, so hopefully he can keep that up. I think that was a bigger loss against Virginia Tech than most people realize, not having him out there. So that's what I have for my leading scorer and matchup to watch. And then lastly, my prediction, going to switch it up. I think Notre Dame's going to win this game by 7-10. I don't think Wake matches up well with them at all. And the way they played on Saturday, it's really hard to pick against them right now, especially against an unranked team. I think we're going to see that a lot coming up. I think Notre Dame has a lot of really winnable games, and this is a nice start to making a push for March. So thank you guys for watching. Go Irish. Peace.